Hello everyone, I'm here with a set review for Canadian Highlander format for the new Magic Origins 2015. And before I start that, I wanted to do a brief review of my last review, just trying to get an idea of how accurate I was. It's kind of interesting to look back and check that out. So I would say in general, it was pretty good, and like a B plus or something. I made two. I forgot to include two cards that I knew they were fine for Highlander, but somehow just didn't get into my folder of cards to talk about. Dragon Hunter, obviously, was a better Savannah Alliance, and Zergo Bellstriker, which is a very solid one-drop for the aggro red decks. Definitely a very solid card. I knew those were good, I knew they were fine, but as I said, for some reason they just didn't get into the set review. So I was pretty happy with everything, as I say, except for my format All-Stars, where I feel I struck out pretty hard on all three of them. This guy, I feel I just misevaluated the sort of bang for your buck in terms of it costs too much for what you're getting. If we want a tutor effect, we've got better tutor effects, and the 4/6 body and the exploit, which for sure Pattern Rector does enjoy that effect, sacrifice effect. Just the whole package wasn't quite mana efficient enough. This mono green, the sort of mono green that Ben Wheeler popularized, is a deck that I've never actually played. I thought this guy would be good in that. I still think it's playable, but I don't know. People who know the deck better than I have said it's not necessarily even playable. I think it's an okay card. Maybe it's good in the Elves deck, say, that Sam plays, that has multiple ways to generate infinite mana. But yeah, there's just it's not quite good enough, I guess. And Narset, I almost want to double down on Narset. Highlander, I think, is a format that's pretty slow to evolve. And for example, I still don't own a Narset, not willing to pay current prices for her. I still think she's okay, but here I think, I don't know, I was just too optimistic in terms of something that comes down and doesn't actually affect the board. 4 mana, doesn't affect the board the turn it comes down, and has a strong chance of not actually affecting the board, for multiple turns. So I still think she's fine. I want to try her out, but while I do think she's still playable, she's definitely not format all-star. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's see how we do with Magic Origins. And let's see, Magic Origins, starting out with a speculative. So again, I'm going to talk about speculative, marginally playable, solid playables, and format all-stars. So these are just some cards that I don't immediately see a deck that I want to put them in. I'm not immediately looking to play them, but they have some... They're good to be aware of, right? So this, again, is there a deck that wants this effect? Survives Wildfire. It's a creature, right? Most of the time, maybe you'd rather have something like Ghostly Prison, which can't be killed, but it is a win condition. So a good card to be aware of, right? Interesting card to be aware of. Is this a combo with some other cards? I'm not sure, and I'm too lazy to try to figure out if it is. But anyway, just be aware that it's around. This is an intriguing little card, right? They get to essentially ramp for perhaps a lot if you're playing some sort of lands deck, and maybe untap them and do something broken. I don't know, Early Harvest or Rude Awakening, who knows. Again, I don't have a deck that I want to put it in, but it's an interesting effect. Good to be aware of. This is obviously like a modern playable card, maybe Legacy, maybe not. But Containment Priest doesn't see a ton of play in Highlander. And I feel... I don't know. It's interesting because imagine, say, what is the one that gains you 6 life? You can cycle it in game 2. That card, right, is a much more... I feel in general you're going to get a lot... If all you want is a cycle effect, right, for this mana cost, that sometimes helps you, I feel that card is going to help you on average more. This is much narrower. On the other hand, this potentially maybe wins the game for you, or stops you from losing, I guess. I'm not sure that there's enough decks in the format where this is good against to be willing to play it. I was talking to Nick Picard and mentioned, of course, Shadow of Doubt, right? Which cycles, so, if it cycles, it's never a bad card. But Shadow of Doubt has, while it can win the game on its own, like can be amazing against certain decks, against almost all decks, is that there's a chance that you get a bonus, that you don't just cycle it, but you also get a 2-for-1 out of it with a fetch land or whatever. So this a very narrow application. It's worth being aware of, but I think it'll see more play in something like Modern than it will see in Highlander. Interesting effect. It's no upheaval, but worth being aware of, I guess. This is pretty exciting, right? Kind of, who doesn't want to have 2 cruel ultimatums or whatever? Again, that idea that you're spending 5 mana to possibly not affect the board. It does get to add 1, right? And maybe you add a burn spell. Maybe you can cast 2 burn spells. I don't know. It's kind of exciting. But again, it may be just too optimistic to actually have it work. This is a good card to be aware of. Again, would I want to put this in Pattern Rector, which likes sometimes sacrificing their creatures? I don't know that they have power high enough for the most part. But, with 3 mana Mind Twist, it's a card worth being aware of. This is kind of interesting, right? First, if you gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. Okay, if you have some random life gain, cool. Mono Red's been doing quite well. If you draw a card, except the first one you draw, in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So it doubles up on any card draw. Draw 6 cards off a Brainstorm. It's tough because you're spending 5 mana, it doesn't affect the board, and you need an additional card for it to have an effect. Kind of like the Goggles, right? That it's not even like some of the various 4+ mana cards that will draw you multiple cards starting the next upkeep, right? This requires other stuff to even make it worth playing, but it's potentially a pretty powerful effect. I don't know. Here, again, I'm not sure exactly what deck wants this. 1 mana to draw 2 cards is an extremely strong effect. Worth being aware of, worth playing around. This, again, I don't have a Highlander deck that wants it, but it's always just good to be aware of these type of graveyard interaction type effects or creatures. And I don't actually think she's playable. I think that at 4 mana, it's just for basically a Lord, and sure, when she attacks, it doesn't even have haste, you gain some life. I just don't think that's quite powerful enough. But if you really need another Elf Lord, there she is. And Demonic Pact, I really don't think the effects are particularly strong. I think the only reason you'd want to play this is if you had a way to give this to your opponent. So if you want to try and do that, awesome. It's just a card to be aware of. Potentially a reasonably strong effect if you're on some elf plan. And this is kind of interesting, right? Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 2/2 creature. So does some land deck want this? Maybe. And of course, Starfield and Nyx. Makes your enchantments creatures, returns enchantments, is part of some crazy enchantment deck. Cool. This is potentially pretty interesting. I've certainly played the, Sapphire Medallion, some of the ones that reduce spells by a particular color by 1. This gets all your instants and sorceries and attacks on a scry for 4 mana for something that doesn't immediately affect the board. I don't know, but that's kind of cool. And this just, I'm not aware of, for this cheap a mana cost for 2 mana, something that comes into play, leaves you a creature and destroys an enchantment. If it's an enchantment and artifact, much more exciting, but just a good card to be aware of. And finally, Time Twister. Time Twister doesn't see much play in Highlander. Maybe it should see more. This is definitely a worse Time Twister. But, I mean, if you want this effect, here it is. And it's just kind of funny. Just another example of something you'd love to give your opponent, right? Get a 5/5 and then give them this 2/2 that pings them for 2 every turn. And there we are. Cool. Let us look at the marginal playables. So we're starting with this. And I've thought about playing the Hexproof 4-mana artifact, right? One that gets rid of all curses attached to you. Hexproof is quite strong, especially if you expect a lot of mono red. And this is actually quite good, right? So it not only does it stop burn type effects or discard or whatnot, which decks may or may not have a lot of, but most decks are trying to attack you with creatures, or if they're not, probably Hexproof is fairly relevant, right? So it's intriguing. 5 mana is a lot, but does this go in some Tolarian Academy deck? Quite possibly. If you want another untap effect, say in Pod, Combo Pod, yeah, it's much worse than the other ones. You do have Bellringer if you're splashing white. So, I don't know. I got on a marginal playable, but we'll see. Again, we also haven't seen a lot of Rug Pod getting played. If you want another Idric Stomp Howler, there you go. This, I think, it's interesting. So, obviously, it's great against Storm, right? And potentially against control decks. Haste swings in there for 2, becomes a 3/3, and probably pings them for another 2. I've had this under solid playable, but then I just wasn't sure for 3 mana, for example. I mean, the deck that wants it, right, is a mono red burn aggro, and I'm just not sure that it wants to be casting 2/2s for 3 with no evasion and etc. So it's not a bad card. I just don't know that it ends up making the cut. Chandra. So here we are. First of the Planeswalkers. They're a creature. You do something. They flip. They become a Planeswalker. So first of all, is the creature good enough, right? Because if we're willing to play the creature, probably we're extremely happy to play the creature plus Planeswalker attached. Alternatively, are we really excited to play the Planeswalker? In which case, is the creature okay enough and the flip requirements low enough that we're willing to go ahead and use, jump through a few hoops. In this case, you play this, then maybe next turn you attack, you play a red spell, untap, ping them, flip. Well, okay. Seems pretty slow and sketchy, right? But is Chandra good enough? +1 to do 2, or -2 to do 2 to a creature. I'm leaving her at 2. And 2 is not a lot. Her ultimate seems amazing, right? 6 damage to each opponent, and they get an emblem which pings them for 3 on their upkeep, every upkeep, right? So hopefully you win once that goes off. Just don't know that she's gonna flip enough, and that she's even strong enough. I guess she's fairly strong when flipped. Like, she goes to 5, soaks up some damage, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not convinced. I think she possibly may not be playable. I put her on a marginally playable. Probably somebody will try her out. Maybe not. I don't know. This guy's kind of exciting. Definitely want mono red, some sort of red aggressive deck. Maybe Jund even or something once. Again, I don't traditional mono red like Colin Miller's deck. I don't think wants to spend 4 mana for this, but it's an intriguing card. This is intriguing, but I think it just doesn't quite make the cut. It's not even draw a card. A lot of the time you're not going to be able to use the ability. And prowess is okay, but not amazing. So on first glance, it looked good. As I thought about it, I came to the conclusion that, again, marginal playable. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't see any play. Liliana. So 2/3, when another non-token creature dies, you get a 2/2 zombie, and you get Liliana. Makes everybody discard stuff. your emblem. Whenever a creature dies, you get it on your control at the beginning of the next end step. Or return a non-legendary creature with a converted mana cost X. So some Reanimator plan doesn't really work, right? Like, tough to get X pretty high. I don't really think she's playable. I'm not sure what deck wants her. Again, partly the fact that her abilities are not that great. I could be wrong. Maybe she goes in green-black Alistair Rock. She is a Planeswalker, right? Except not always. And it requires that you have another creature in play. And if you're playing creatures, this 2/3 for 3 is not exactly what you want. So, I guess she has lifelink. I mean, I don't know. I'm saying not playable. Put her here on a marginal playable. So, I don't know. This, again, I'm not aware of a deck that wants it, but I could be wrong. It's good to be aware that it's around. And, you know, it's a reasonable effect. Kills Thrun. Ophidian, eat your heart out. Still not sure that this makes the cut. As opposed, you know, when you think about Shadow Mage Infiltrator, which has Fear, which I think is a much more relevant than Prowess. You know, you don't really care about the damage. You're just trying to draw that card when you're playing stuff like this. And Shadow Mage Infiltrator doesn't see much play. But who knows? Worth being aware of. Again, if you want an Ophidian effect, this is currently the best we've got in straight blue. And this, if you got a Merfolk deck, awesome. This definitely makes the cut very exciting. Otherwise, I don't think it does. Intriguing card. Draw 2 cards. If you control an artifact, discard a card. Again, in Academy, would you prefer either a mix of 1 mana, draw spells, where you help smooth your early game, and or possibly dig for that 1 bomb you're looking for, and X draw spells like big Sphinx's Revelation and Blue Sun Zenith and stuff like that. Do you want these mid-range ones, or would you rather be out at that low and high end and ignore the middle? I think probably you do want to ignore the middle, but it's an interesting card. I got it here in the marginal playables. And this, again, stats are not great, but some sort of Hate Bears deck, sure, put it in there. I haven't seen a lot of decks getting played that really wants this, but hey, it's not bad. And this, again, if you want to, it's a fairly solid 2-drop. No evasion, no flying, but maybe gets in there, White Weenie. And there we are. Excellent. Marginals, solid playables. All right, what do we got going on here? Ooh, this one's one I'm actually perhaps most excited about in the set. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it's potentially a nice card in Sorensen Green. It, again, is a card that rewards you for playing all these little cantrips, right? And cantrips definitely help smooth out your draws in general, even though they're not super powerful on their own. And so the more reasons we can have, sort of complementary reasons we can have to be playing them, the better. And Trample's awesome. And I think this is quite interesting. Nissa. Probably going to see the most play, I think, of these cycle of Planeswalkers. And very solid, right? I've played Borderland Ranger, green-black Howie Rock, for example. I think for sure always can use more mana, right? And great, we get a creature, maybe we jump, trade off, whatever, that's fine. Maybe we reanimate, bring her back, who knows? And the Planeswalker ability is quite strong as well, right? The draw a card, essentially, slightly better, except your opponent gets to see it, because we get to accelerate if it's a land. And though, I mean, at that point, probably don't have lands in hand as well to play. Protects herself if needed, and quite likely wins the game with her ultimate. So I think very solid. The only knock is that I'm not sure how many decks there are that want to play her. So, for example, Blue Green Sorensen, I'm not sure how often you're getting to 7 lands, right? And do you really just want Borderland Ranger? I think you can do better. So It's slightly narrow, I think, but a very solid card. Great. A great addition to Goblins, I think. Just more really solid 1-drops are great because you do want to curve out, and we are slightly lacking on excellent 1-drops, and I think this is an excellent 1-drop. I think this is quite playable. 4 damage for 3 that can go at player or creature, I think is quite good. And the fact that quite early on it's not going to be able to be countered, I think is worth the fact that it's sorcery speed. Again, you know, we'll play the what's the one that you can spend 2 mana, you know, 3 red or 6 colorless, whatever. That one I think is fine. This one's easier to cast, sure, sorcery speed, but I think it's worth it. I think nothing amazing, but I think it does make the cut in red burn decks. This I think is very solid. I think so. If you're not going off in Storm, it's not very good. When you are going off, it's awkward because you have to invest 5, and then you're left with just 3 black floating, right? So potentially awkward on mana colors requirements, but Demonic Tutor, essentially, you know, if you can make that work, it is a Demonic Tutor, right? It does only cost 2. And I think a lot of the times once you're going off, you do only need black. You know, you can win with only black. So I'm going to put this as quite solid. We'll see. Could be wrong. 5 mana, again, is a large initial investment. And what makes, obviously, Demonic Tutor great is you can cast it turn 2 to set yourself up. And again, this is only great. This is only potentially strong when you're comboing off, I think, and getting use out of this extra mana. Jace. Jace is interesting. So, a 0-2 looter, you know, I've played around with some Reanimator decks every once in a while, and they want looters, and the 0-2 is so much better than 1-1, right? That's great. That's awesome. We're never attacking. And so just for that, I think Jace would see, if it was just a 0-2 looter for 2, it would see play. Interestingly enough, it is kind of annoying that you must flip Jace, right? Sometimes maybe you just want to loot, because when we examine these, okay, protects Jace, you know, shrinks a creature. Okay. Ultimate, of course, is pretty bad in Highlander, so basically worthless. And then it can't even target yourself. You can't even mill yourself. And then this target sorcery instant from your graveyard gains flashback, right? Or you may cast. Oh, you may cast target instant or sorcery. Oh, interesting. I thought I gave him flashback. That's actually slightly better. But again, sometimes maybe you just want to loot. Maybe you got nothing in that graveyard, but you got 5 cards and you got to flip. I still think it's a very solid, very solid addition to Reanimator decks. I don't know that you're just jamming it in any blue deck, right? I just don't know that these abilities are strong enough to jump through these hoops and you know, you're not up a card or anything. So again, solid playable, but I think in specific decks. Relic Seeker. Kind of excited about Relic Seeker. I think yeah, I think it's Stoneforge, you know, Stoneforge 2.0, except it's a downgrade for sure. But I think in you know, say White Weenie, this is great. It's, you know, potentially a 3/3 that gets some equipment that you want, right? I mean, I could be overestimating this. It's possible that it is a marginal playable or not even a playable, but again, Stoneforge is amazing, the fact that it gets to cheat stuff into play. But a lot of the time you're going for a sword, and it's only 1 extra mana, and of course it can get countered, but you know, for sure that 2 mana is relevant rather than 3. But I'm gonna put this here as a solid playable, and we'll see how it turns out. and Gideon. So Gideon is fine, right? Because we know, in this case, we know that some decks want a 2-1. Excellent. This is 2-1 with upside. Get it in there, right? For Savannah Lions. And it's not amazing, I don't think. So it protects itself at a lot of mana, the cost of a lot of mana. When it flips, sure, somebody has to attack, so maybe you get to eat a small creature or something. Or one of your creatures blocks protecting Gideon. Or, of course, next turn it attacks as a 4/4. Cool, I die. I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's like, wow, game-changing or anything, but I think it's obviously, if you wanted 2-1, upgrade for of whatever 2-1 you were playing already. And there we have it. So I didn't choose any format all-stars here. I almost had Jason there, but then realized, again, it's very narrow, and I just don't know if it's good enough. So we just got some solid playables. I think we got some nice playables here. And some interesting cards. But, as I say, no format all-stars. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And I'll see you again for the next set. Cheers.